Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Nonprofit Leadership Career Week panel. My name is Abby Hodder, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. This afternoon, we have exciting guests who are here to speak to you about the world of nonprofit leadership. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items that we'd like to review. In case of an emergency, please evacuate through the nearest fire exit. For this room, this is the door to my right as well as the door in the back. Please turn off or mute your cell phones and also remove them from the tabletops. We kindly ask you remain seated throughout the entire duration of the panel. And please postpone any questions you may have until the end. There is 15 minutes allotted for student questions. And finally, as many of you know, this is a Learning Passport eligible event. You would have not received yet your Learning Passport activity survey, so at the end I will distribute those to each of you. Complete the survey as well as the activity page in your Learning Passport booklet, and then you will be eligible to receive your stamp. If you did forget your passport booklet, do not fear, we have activity pages for you, so you are still able to get credit for the activity. We will now begin with our first question. Briefly describe the organization you work for and also your position, and we'll start to my left with Jillian.
So I sat in the wrong seat. I didn't realize I was going to have to go first every time. That's okay. My name is Jillian Batt, and I work in communications here at the Mount. I've been here for about 4.5 years. Most of my career has actually been in the nonprofit sector, lucky for me. I'm a grad of the Mount a few moons ago, and before that, Memorial University, a degree in English. My degree here is in public relations. So at the Mount, as Director of Communications, I'm part of a gigantic umbrella that is university relations. So that's everything from communications, marketing, fundraising, advancement, alumni relations, student recruitment, international and domestic. Those are not all my pieces of the pie. My slice of the pie is communications. In that capacity, I'm responsible for all media relations for the university. I'm a chief support on government relations. I lead all community relations, storytelling. What else do I do? Issues management, crisis communications, which I hope we don't have a lot of at the university. And I major event support as well. A big part of what I do is kind of act like internal counsel on communications to anybody at the university who needs it. So to any person, project, program, senior leadership, whomever needs my assistance, advice on communications, I act as counsel to them. And as well, I think another great benefit of what I do in an environment like I do, I get to sit on some pan-university committees and working groups that have very little to do with communications, but I get to bring sort of that global communications expertise, risk management expertise to the table, and these would be things like searches for folks in vastly different departments than mine. So maybe search committee for art gallery director is a good example. I also sit on the Senate Student Experience Committee. So there's organizations that I'm groups within the organization I'm a part of through my role, but not directly having to do with my role. So that's pretty much who I am, how I got here, and what I do.
Okay, so my name is Amanda Hatch, and I work with the QE2 Foundation. So our organization really focuses on our mission of advancing healthcare to support patients in Atlantic Canada, and we deal with the adults. So all children grow up, as we hope, and so we focus on their care once they do. And my role specifically at the foundation is Director of Annual Programs. And so we brought together our annual giving program, which is direct marketing, online, direct mail, and our special events and community initiatives, and brought them together under one portfolio. So I work with an incredible team of about 20 people who execute on those programs on a day-to-day basis. And our organization, in terms of the non-for-profit world, is one of the larger that you would come into contact with. There are a lot of organizations that, you know, have an executive director and a few employees, but we are a fairly large organization, so it's quite an interesting dynamic. We have a communications department, our direct marketing department, a donor calling program. We have a major gifts department, all focusing on fundraising and support for donor services, stewardship. All of those different facets have different people that support those roles, where in a smaller organization, one person has to wear many different hats. So it's quite an interesting dynamic.
Hi, everybody. My name is Betty Watson-Borg, and I think the description of the organization I work for is going to be a little historical. I spent 30 years working for the YMCA in communities across Canada, and in 2015 wrapped up as the president and CEO of the YMCA of Greater Halifax, Dartmouth. And so I guess one of my claims to fame is that I was the first woman president and CEO of the YMCA in Halifax in 160 years of the organization's history, so it's something that I'm very proud of. And so again, 30 years working for the Y across Canada. Started as a volunteer, then became a program leader, then became a program manager, program director, and really moved hierarchically up through the organization over 30 years, and wrapped up that role in 2015. And now I have my own consultancy where I do individual, group, and team coaching, leadership coaching, organizational coaching, and spend a lot of time working with nonprofit, private sector, public sector, and community, and finding ways for all of those diverse perspectives to come around the same table to solve really, really complex challenges that communities have been dealing with for many, many, many years. So that's a kind of a snapshot of my history.
And my name is Lisa Weatherhead, and I'm the Regional Executive Director of Cystic Fibrosis Canada for the 4 Atlantic provinces. My position's a little bit unique because I am Executive Director in a region inside of a national organization. So where we're a very small shop, I have myself plus 2 staff, we work with a really strong national team that has all of these other pieces in there. So there's a lot of collaboration to work toward our mission, and our mission is really simple. It's funding world-class research, clinical care. We fund 42 specialized clinics across Canada, including 5 here in Canada, serving our patients, as well as advocacy and awareness. So it's a really, if I think about where I focus my time, it is in every direction, but a big focus on fundraising itself, community development, and volunteer engagement. We're a staff of 3, but we work with 8 really strong volunteer chapters across the region. So there are kind of unpaid staff that do a whole lot of really good work. I also work on the advocacy side, whether it's advocating for access to new drugs and new treatments, or raising awareness and just making sure that cystic fibrosis as a rare disease has a place at the table of conversation. We are rare, and that makes, we are a rare disease, and it makes us, we do have to raise our voices in different ways and get creative and make sure that the 380 people in Atlantic Canada have a voice.
Thank you. Our next question is, how did you come to work in the nonprofit sector, as well as how has your education and experience led you to your current position?
The majority of my career has been spent in the nonprofit sector. So prior to coming to the Mount, I worked at the IWK Health Center. I was there in communications for the corporate organizational side of the hospital, if you will, so not the fundraising arm, but for the hospital proper for almost 12 years prior to the IWK. So how did I come to work in the nonprofit sector? Well, directly through the Mount, actually. I was exploring my co-op opportunities a few moons ago and thought, well, I'm going to get a slice of all these lives. But I also thought I was a corporate person. So I want to start with a corporate gig. Maybe then I'll try a non-for-profit off for size just so I can say I did it. And then maybe an agency. And the posting that attracted me the most was hands down the IWK posting because it was almost a corporate communications application in a nonprofit setting. So I applied for it, got that gig, and that was my first co-op work terms. This is my second degree. And then I didn't want to let it go. And they offered me part-time work through the rest of my degree. And back in the day, co-op was not mandatory. I think it's great that it is now, but it wasn't then. And so I quit co-op, stuck it out at the IWK while I finished my degree, and then stayed on a little bit afterwards. Hopped on a plane after that, foolishly. Well, it's a wonderful place, but it wasn't the place for me to live forever. Moved to Toronto. Had tons of fun, and moved into the corporate sector, and again had tons of fun. I worked actually at Alliance Atlantis for a little while, so I was kind of the complete antithesis of what I was doing in the nonprofit sector. I worked in the entertainment industry, promoting television shows on HGTV and Slice and things like that. But my heart yearned for the nonprofit sector pretty much from the moment I started that job, though I did learn a heck of a lot. And my heart also yearned for the East Coast. So when my old job at the IWK became vacant again, I got a call from them saying, "Do you want to come back?" And I jumped at the opportunity. So 3 years in Toronto, and then I moved back here to work at the IWK. So if I hadn't had that co-op experience connecting me with the IWK and really putting the nonprofit experience first for me, I probably wouldn't be where I am today. And then I made the calculated move back to the Mount after almost 12 years. So I was getting a little tired of the IWK, even though it's a wonderful place. I was waiting around for just the right job, and one of my other loves is the Mount, which is, in my opinion, hands down the best university around. So I applied for this job, and here I am. So my education was a direct connect for me in terms of career path.
Mine is mixed. So I'll start with where I began, which was at St. Mary's University. And in my 4th year, there was a program that I adored. It was a consultancy program, so it gave students an opportunity to work directly with businesses in the community. And so through that project, I worked with a company called Just Us Coffee Roasters and helped them with their marketing plan and where they're going to set up shop in their new location. And it was a wonderful experience, and it led to my first opportunity for my career, which was working directly with the Business Consultancy Center through St. Mary's. And through that experience, I had so many interactions with entrepreneurs and people who were trying to develop the economics in their economies through First Nation communities. And so you just saw the power and the passion of all of those individuals. But truly, I wanted that sexy job. I wanted the advertising agency, the ad man world. And so I went after that, and I spent probably 10 years working within the advertising industry, but I always had a calling back to certain things. One of those things along the way was the Canada Games when they were here in 2011. I had an opportunity to work with the host societies. So it's nonprofit, they're not out to make money, they are about the athletes. So that was an incredible experience and a couple of years of my career. Having gone back into advertising, I still had that calling. So I started to volunteer. And I was volunteering with an organization who provides residential care for children who've had really complex traumatic backgrounds. And they need different levels of support than foster care and those type of programs can provide. So through volunteering, providing my marketing expertise to this organization, I slowly brought my way into the organization, sitting on their board, and I've now been the chair of their board for the past couple of years, which has been an incredible experience. And during that time volunteering and thinking of the volunteer groups that you rely so heavily on, you really do pour your heart and soul into the work, and you fall in love with the mission and what it is that you can achieve. And so being in the advertising industry still during all of this experience, I just had this yearning to have a little bit more meaning. Not that I didn't enjoy the world of advertising, but let me tell you, if you ever get into it, it's tough. It's like 10 times the experience you get per year. It's very, very demanding, and I don't regret a minute of it. But I really wanted just that extra bit of purpose beyond just what I was doing from a volunteer perspective. And I too was waiting for the right opportunity, and that's when a job posting for the QE2 Foundation brought itself to fruition, and they were looking for someone to come in and lead their annual programs. And had they called it a director of annual giving, I would not have applied, which is kind of interesting because they were looking for something a little different, and they were very strategic about how they were seeking that skill set, and it called to me, but I wouldn't have applied to it if it was something different. So that's just something to keep your mind to when you're thinking about those job titles that are out there, really digging down and uncovering what it truly could mean in alignment with your skill set and where you want your career to go. So I kind of fell into it over a long period of time and a lot of different experiences.
Building on the falling into it, I can literally say I fell into my position at the YMCA. I had always wanted to be a veterinarian when I was growing up. I loved farms, I loved animals, and that's what I wanted to do. So I went to University of Guelph, which I would argue is quite a good university as well. But I realized I'm at the Mount, so I better be careful here. So I was, and I didn't have the marks to be a veterinarian, so I ended up graduating with a Bachelor of Science in Agribusiness, so agriculture and business, because of my love of farming and animals and all that sort of thing. And then I moved from Guelph to Alberta to follow my life partner, and I found myself all alone in a community that I had never lived in, far from my family, far from my supports, far from the sports teams that I'd been involved in. And so I walked into the local YMCA, I signed up as a member, and I took a course on how to become a fitness instructor. And so I took that course, and I can tell you that one course, that one skill building course absolutely changed the course of my life. So I became a fitness instructor, and I became a volunteer at that local organization, and it gave me structure, it gave me friendships, it gave me skills, it gave me confidence, it gave me leadership. So as I look back on the question of education in the day, even up until about a year ago, there really were no advanced education, university programs, degrees that you could take in the nonprofit sector. So you'll find in the nonprofit sector, there are a lot of people like me who have fallen into it and have learned by the hard school of experience and trying things. And so I'll take this moment to do the pitch for the nonprofit program that the Mount has been very strategic and visionary in bringing, is that is an opportunity to probably avoid a lot of years of hard experiences and learn the theory, learn the practice before you actually get into the sector. So again, that was my experience that led me to the current position. And there was one other thing I was going to say, and it's totally blanked. All to say, I know, having a university degree, though, was the entry point for the organization that I worked for. So, and then taking that post-secondary education, which demonstrated that you can read, you can write, you can communicate, you can do projects, you can do presentations. That was really an entry point, and I think really continues to be a strong entry point. And if you can add the nonprofit leadership types of academic courses, that's on the side of angels for this type of work.
So I came to work in the not-for-profit sector in kind of a roundabout way. It feels like 150 years ago that I did a Bachelor of Commerce in Marketing and Management and very quickly went to work in an advertising field that led me to, nobody ever grows up or wakes up in the morning and says, oh, gee, but I want to be a salesperson when I grow up. But it actually is a very respectable career, and you learn a lot of really important things and skills there. So I went from a very small advertising world locally to working for Xerox. And when I went to Xerox, it was a huge staff. I became a little bit of a number, and I found that I was really missing the community. My job 2 months ago was to know everything that was happening in every business in town and really be on the cutting edge, and all of a sudden I was separated from that. And I had to make a decision. One of the best pieces of career advice I got while there was, if you like the organization, you find a way to make it work for you. And how I found a way to make that work for me was through the Community Involvement Committee, where we assessed and decided what charities and organizations and groups we'd partner with for volunteer and funding support. Through that, you get to know people and you build your network a little bit, and I became involved as, kind of a event volunteer leading, at that time, Bowl for Kids' Sake. It turned into a role with the Relay for Life. So kind of doing the fun side of things and filling some of those bigger volunteer roles that Sometimes it's hard to find people, but I just kept making eye contact with people. And it led to a board role. Through one of the contacts that I had in Relay for Life, actually, I learned about a job in the fundraising world, and I said, no, I'm on a perfect career path. My, things are going exactly how they should be. The trajectory is just right. So no, I'm not interested. But about 6 months later, the same position came up again, and I thought, well, you can't ignore opportunity. It doesn't knock twice very often. So through that process, I realized that the skills that I had built in that role at Xerox and through that extra stuff with the community involvement had set me up really well to explore some interesting stuff. So I took a role with the university in fundraising as a development officer in a major campaign. And the learning curve was huge from a kind of a product perspective or where I was, but the relationship building skills that I had learned and kind of those sales skills really were very transferable. And for a lot of fundraisers, they'll say, well, it's not sales, and it's not, it truly isn't, but there's a lot of really transferable skills. And from there, I left that role to go into the healthcare charity, which is a whole other learning curve. But when I go back to think about, did my education way back when influence that? And I didn't really think it did until I was moving and found an old accounting book and realized how much I relied on that and how those very basic skills all that time ago were still there and really being applied. And every bit of education you get, whether it's in a university environment or whether it's through professional associations, is so relevant if you find the nugget in it and actually choose to apply it.
Our next question is, what are your career goals?
I live in the moment professionally, probably a little bit too much, but my personal goals are to always continue to be a better communicator in a nonprofit context. Probably my primary goal is a continued contribution at a leadership level in a nonprofit context. But beyond that, there's nowhere I definitely want to go. There's no organization I definitely want to work for. I'm just open to opportunity. For me, though, I would say I would happily finish my career in an executive director role in an organization I feel very passionately about. I think those roles are wonderful for the opportunity they give you to flex muscles in communications, in human resources, in governance, in fundraising, in volunteer management. So it would broaden my depth of contribution from purely communications marketing to something much more significant. So I think that would be the happy culmination for me of a career. But other than that, I tend to live where I am and just try to do a better job of what I'm doing.
This was a question in the last job interview that I had, which is the position I'm in now. And I had the strangest answer. And I said, well, I didn't know that a VP of philanthropy was a real job. This is who I'm working for. And so I don't think I have an answer for you, but I can tell you what a retirement dream looks like for me. And that is to open my own business, trade imports. And that seemed to work for them because I'm still there. And when I think back at why I had that answer, it's because truly my career goals are to always continue to learn, always continue to evolve, always continue to find new experiences because you don't know what you don't know. I would say that 3 years ago, what my career goals were in the advertising industry are completely different than the position that I'm in now. I manage a staff of 20 people. 20 humans, individuals. They're emotional, mostly women. I love y'all men, but mostly women. And, there's a lot to that. You're not just managing the person, the role, you're managing the human being. And so the type of person I need to be in order to be effective and support the team best is very different today than what it was 3 years ago. And I've found passion and excitement in what that role is and how I've developed as a person and how I'm helping my team to develop as well. And so I still don't know exactly what those end goals look like for me. It's, you know, kind of living in the moment as well. But it's also just the excitement of the unknown and not putting myself in a position where this is the only future that I have. I actually think that I could take a very significant shift and go in a completely different direction, and very likely it's still in a nonprofit environment, because that's where I find so much passion and excitement in the people that I work with and what it is that I'm able to impact at the end of the day. So I don't know. I don't know what my career goals are, and I'm okay, but I'm still learning and developing and evolving every single day.
Yeah, so that makes me think it's okay to say I don't know what my career goals are. And also, I have to say, at this age and stage in my life, I don't get asked this question very much. People say, are you retired? And I say, no, I can't afford to retire. So I think as I think about my career over the past 30 years, it's always been alignment to my values. And is the organization that I'm working with and the people that I'm working with, is there consistency or a synergy with the values? So again, I stayed with the YMCA for 30 years. And it was because the values of the organization were very, very similar to my own values. And so that sort of how I would sort of turn that outwards in terms of a reflection for yourselves is that the nonprofit sector is, you know, I was thinking it's as diverse as the private sector. However, I think the nonprofit sector is as diverse as every single family. So you think about diversity of families, the composition, the culture, the relationships, and all that kind of stuff. That feels to me more like the nonprofit sector than private sector that may have more kind of consistent standards. So if you think about the nonprofit sector, and as you're looking out to it and considering these options, look for those organizations that feel like they have an alignment to your values, and don't give up if the first one or the second one or the third one still doesn't feel right. I absolutely guarantee there will be nonprofit organizations out there that make you feel like you're at home and you're part of that family. And that has certainly been what has been my compass over the last 30 years and continues to be my compass now when I'm not working for one organization. And ultimately, am I in a place that I can share my learnings, that I can help others build their professional and personal leadership capacity, resiliency, confidence, and those sorts of things. So that values piece has been very important for me, and find that that's when it really feels right, and you really feel like you're at home and you're with your family when those values start to line up.
My name is Lisa, and I'm 46 years old, and I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So I'm glad that somebody else said, I don't know what. So what are my career goals? Honestly, I do live in the moment with a view to the future, and a big thing that I look at with any role I consider, and with my current role, is learn it, do it, and teach it. So learn the skills you need to do, and that doesn't happen once. It doesn't happen in orientation week. It happens every day or cyclically, and as you're taking on new challenges and new projects with every change in staff. And then are you executing on it? Are you taking what you've learned, and am I able to do it? Am I actually able to fulfill the mission? Am I able to fulfill my role and my goal? And then can I teach other people? And that doesn't just mean teaching them skills. Of course, that's always part of it, but helping to build their leadership skills themselves, identifying themselves whether the not-for-profit sector is where they want to be or if it's somewhere else. There are so many paths to take, even within the charitable or not-for-profit sector. And you can use any part of your brain and any part of your imagination. And I think the biggest thing is, for me, building a passion for the organization that you're with and connecting with people and being able to have some fun. In a lot of not-for-profit worlds, you work with some pretty heavy stuff, and your mission isn't always light and fluffy. There's always, you know, silver linings and hope, but you need to be able to have fun and enjoy yourself and make sure you work on a team that has a chance to have a laugh, as well as support your team, support your community as well. So learn it, do it, teach it, and keep on having fun.
So our next question is, what do you like about your work and what do you dislike, as well as what do you find the most challenging? And we can start with Lisa this time.
What do I like about my work is so easy. It's the people. We work with, I think every charity probably says this, but we have such a special group of population that we work with, our families and our people living with CF. There's just something different and something special. So I'll often say if you can start the day and end the day by talking to one of our people with CF or one of their family members, that's a good day. What do I dislike about my work? The lack of resources, and one of those resources is time. I'll often say have a starfish day. You're flat out in 5 directions, and it amazes me, and I guess this is probably what I find most challenging as well, it amazes me how many files cross your desk in the run of the day and how many things you accomplish and how you shift gears from dealing with human resource issues or internal stuff, to working on, working with a major donor, to planning an event, to debriefing an event, to dealing with an executive issue. So it's one of the things that I dislike is the lack of resources, and one of the things I find most challenging is just the incredible flow and volume.
Yeah, and yes, all of those things. What I love about this work, and what I have loved about it, and what I love about the nonprofit sector is there is no limits to where your creativity and your imagination can be tapped into. So many cases where you have an idea, you have the energy, you can figure out where to find those resources, and then you can make it happen. So there's a very entrepreneurial element to the nonprofit sector, and it's driven out of, in some cases, lack of resources. So that's where the lack of resources can actually spark a lot of imagination and creativity. And I've loved that. So that idea of getting bored, you just don't get bored because there's so much to do. What I dislike about it, love the people, and at the same time, what trigger for me is encountering people that have come to the organization where they have an agenda that is about their own agenda rather than what's in the center of the table, whether it's the people, the clients, the participants, or the organization. And that's just, and I find that very challenging because I find it draining and I find it time-consuming when people have come with their own agenda that isn't that holistic reason that the other 99% of the people came around the table. So if you have any suggestions on what to do about that, then I very much welcome them. Thanks.
Okay, so I think what I love most about my work is twofold. One is what it is that we accomplish as an organization. And when you go in and you talk to patients and you talk to physicians and you talk to technicians and nursing teams that have equipment and programs that have been made available from the donations that we're able to bring in, it really is quite special. It's the fill my cup day, but you don't get that every single day. So you have to figure out ways to fill your cup along the way. And that the mission is really what keeps the entire organization working together. But the other arm of what I enjoy most about my work is the people. And when I'm working with team members, colleagues, or on my own team, and we help each other do something incredible. There's just such power in that, and we're so connected. Something that I do today will affect someone the next day or a year from now, and really kind of that connectivity that I have with everyone, no matter where we sit on the organizational chart, is quite impressive and something that I value. Something that I dislike is that scarcity is a problem for everyone, and it doesn't matter the scale of your organization. We are a larger organization with a lot of people who are working. There's 42 full-time staff. And at the end of the day, we don't have enough time, we don't have enough resources, we don't have enough capacity, we don't have enough people, because it feels like the scale of your ideas and what it is that you want to accomplish grows per individual that you add. And so there's never really a point when you reach that threshold of the perfect number, the perfect resource number, the perfect skill sets to have at the table to be able to accomplish what it is that you want to do. I also think that's something that's incredibly exciting. exciting because you're constantly working toward a future state, and you're still working on what you need to get through today, but there's a future vision, a future person, a future organization, a future mission that you're trying to get to, and there's always this this walk toward that. So something I find most challenging in line with that is exactly that, just building capacity as an individual, how you can kind of take that scarcity effect and start thinking through all of the different things that you have to accomplish, and how do you prioritize it, and how do you make it manageable, and how do you make it something that you can accomplish and identify what it is that means success for you today, what it means for success for you tomorrow. And as part of that balance and finding time for just you, it's okay, and you should. And so that's probably the most challenging things that I find for myself and for others, is making sure that it's okay for you to take time for yourself, because there are so many things that you want to be doing all the time, and the mission is pouring you into it at all times. You don't want to let it go, but at some point you do have to make sure that you're taking care of number one.
What I love the most has pretty much been touched on, but I think I can add a little something. So I love about the Mount our mandate and the students, hands down. That is what I love the most, the people of the Mount, the people and the mandate. But something else I love about the Mount, and that I similarly loved about the IWK, and that I think is characteristic of nonprofits, more so than corporate environments, is opportunity. Opportunity to stretch beyond your silo, that is, for me, communications. So in a corporate environment, which I was in, we were investor relations, corporate communications, but it was very strict that that's your portfolio. So if there was anything HR at all related, for example, respectful workplace committees or cultural competency efforts, those were strictly housed within corporate human resources environments. But at the IWK, I had the opportunity to be trained as a cultural competency, I guess, practitioner and trainer train the trainer for other individuals. Here, I've had the opportunity to sit on countless hiring committees for jobs that have nothing to do with what I do strictly, so things like art gallery director and others. So I think that breadth of opportunity is another standout piece that I love about all of my nonprofit environments, to be honest. One thing I've disliked about my work, and my work hasn't been so much in the direct charitable or community agency sector, but rather in my nonprofit experience, they've been pseudo-government organizations, if you will, so hospitals and universities in a similar category. What I've disliked is having to justify things, often expenditures, that you wouldn't have to justify in a corporate environment. And one really good example of that is employee recognition. It sort of felt like every time we did something to celebrate our employees at the IWK, and God knows they need to be celebrated, there was a lot of, we were chastised quite a bit for those efforts. And that happens when you're a donor. You just have to be absolutely cognizant of every dollar spent when you're a donor or publicly funded, taxpayer funded organization. But that's frustrating, because these organizations are the reason they exist and do so well. All of our organizations are the people, and they need to be celebrated too. So that frustrated me a little bit, that we were having to justify even the mediocre amounts we were sometimes spending on celebrating our very valuable employees. The biggest challenge, I would say, is the scarcity of resources, financial resources, budgets. And a really good example of this is when I left my corporate employer in Toronto, Alliance Atlantis, which no longer exists. But when I left there, so they produced CSI, we had an entertainment arm, a movie distribution arm, with New Line Cinema, and all of these digital, specialty TV channels. So my job was largely investor relations. So one of the last things I was tasked with doing was producing a report to shareholders to be featured at our annual general meeting, and all the MD and all that financial stuff that went with it, all those documents. Huge task, gruesome task, but also a big writing and creative task, because there was storytelling elements to the publication. But the distribution was fairly limited. It was primarily for shareholders at our AGM and a little bit beyond that. And so I can't even remember how many copies we had to make, say 10,000. The budget in the end, well, there kind of wasn't a budget. You just spent what you had to spend. I remember it being an obscene number, like well over $100,000, $200,000 for this publication. So I left that being one of my final tasks, came back straight into the IWK job, and they wanted me to do a community report. And that's basically their version of an annual report, because the community is those are their shareholders, stakeholders, primary stakeholders. And they said, you've got like $20,000 and we want 300,000 copies and you got to get it in every newspaper in the entire maritime region. Like, whoa, okay. So it was literally a tenth the budget. So that's probably the biggest challenge, but a happy challenge in some ways, because I think, bring it on, I can do that. We got this. But that's probably the biggest challenge, is doing far more with far less.
Thank you. So what do you spend the most time on at work? So you could do it either per day, in a week, or the month or the year, but like what takes up your most amount of time? And we can start with Lisa again.
It's like that Facebook thing, what my mom thinks I do, what my friends think I do, and what I really do. First of all, I'd like to say in my previous roles, before you're in a leadership role, you can actually focus on, you have a task in front of you, you have a mission, and you know your role, you know your goal, and you're able to really focus on that, and you can break it down, and it's simple and it's easy. Moving into leadership expands that exponentially. What I'd like to spend my time on are things like fundraising and being in front of elected officials. But where I find myself spending my time is more in the A word, in administration, and kind of working on strategy and being in meetings and that sort of thing. And while that's all really important, sometimes that can be a little bit frustrating. So it's important for me to be able to balance that and make sure that I'm, as much as possible, owning my time and pulling in, doing the other stuff that it all needs to happen. But I do find that I get caught up in administration and emails and meetings and meeting to death. So that's not my proudest answer I've ever given.
Yeah, that was a great segue because I can't answer that question the way it was asked. So I think of time as kind of a pie chart where you have different colors and quadrants and pieces of pie, and what do you have to do and how much time you're spending on it. So as I think about my past role as the CEO of the organization, and very similar to being the head of a regional organization, so governance, working with the board of directors, supporting them, guiding them, navigating them, recruiting them, and everything that goes with the governance would have been a #1 priority. #2, close behind, is the human resources. So at the Y, we had over 400 employees, and so human resources, and again, the policy, the support, the day-to-day of trying to create a safe, respectful culture so people could do their greatest work, and at the same time, there's 400 people, so there's lots and lots of HR. Thirdly would be finance, so that's finding the resources that you need for the organization and doing a good job on that expenditure side. And I have to concur, spending the disproportionate amount of time spent sometimes in justifying something that would normally be accepted somewhere else is very frustrating. So that would be 1, 2, 3. Fourth would be sort of that brand and communications and getting your organization's name out. And all it takes is one crisis, either real or perceived crisis, and all those other things have to stop, and all hands on deck for the communications. And then the fifth case in our case was the program. So we offered a huge diversity of programs and services, the quality side, the outcome side, the evaluation side, the justification to funders side, as well as safety, risk, and all of those things that go along with providing programs and services. So if I broke that pie chart into sort of 5, one could be taking the whole pie on one day, the next day there could be 2 or 3 of them, and so that adaptive leadership and being able to go where you need to go to be, honoring your organization, and then supporting the people in your organization, whether they're staff or volunteer, in being successful in their pieces of the pie and the parts of the pie that they have to function on. So I couldn't come up with one thing.
Just on the scarcity comment, Dan Pallotta, he has a TED Talk. If you have 20 minutes, go have a look. It's a good 20 minutes to spend, and it really puts into perspective some of the challenges that nonprofits have when it comes to justifying administrative costs. Lottery is a good example in terms of how some organizations will try to fundraise and raise money. It costs a lot to get a lot, and it's the perception of our communities, you know, good or bad, that people should just be willing to give you, you know, $1 million homes and, you know, all these vacations and do it out of the goodness of their heart. Unfortunately, we just don't have a world that works that way. So yes, 20 minutes, just, I think it'll change a couple of perspectives, and I hope to share that out as wide as we can. Where I spend the most time at work is in meetings and figuring out how to have less meetings. And it's to all of the points that you're saying. Sometimes we put ourselves in positions where we operate in crisis. And so in my role, I'm trying very diligently to find efficiencies and ways for our teams and our programs to work better and more effectively together, while not losing that spark of creativity and inspiration. So working with our communications team, our donor services team, our managers, our officers, our coordinators, working with our stakeholders. We have incredible volunteers, some who have very large personalities that they're drivers in the back end, coming from a sales background, which is amazing, and that's exactly the type of passion that you want. But it can create a lot of crisis to manage and emotions to temper. So it's really, at the end of the day, in a nonprofit and a fundraising role, it's really relationship management. And it's single relationship, no matter, it doesn't matter about hierarchy. Every relationship has an impact and is important, and we all affect each other, and so you're trying to constantly use critical thinking skills to navigate all of those different relationships, which you can apply to your entire life, not just your professional work. So that's probably where I spend most of my time.
I think it was Betty who said you might have a typical day, but then it goes sideways. So that's really what my world is like. So I determine that I'm going to do X, and it turns into Y almost every single day, but in a good way, often because stories percolate to the top that need to be told now because they're more relevant than they were yesterday. And so but ultimately, what I do is pretty much equal parts planning and doing. And in my realm, I very much emphasize the storytelling media relations piece. So telling the stories of the Mount, the people, the programs, the places at the Mount that contribute both to the organization's overall strategic mandate, to donor relations, fundraising efforts, to alumni relations efforts, helping inform prospective student opinions, helping faculty researchers tell their stories to assist with grant applications and garner more resources. So largely what I'm doing is media relations, storytelling, community relations, with a little bit of all the other communications pieces thrown in.
So our last question before I open the floor to some students' questions is, what do you see as the key skills needed to work in the nonprofit industry today? And we can start with Amanda.
All right, my turn. The key skills that I would recommend really come down to critical thinking. There is so many times when I've been faced with a new challenge or new project, and team members will say, "Oh, well, I've never done that before, so I can't approach that problem, or I can't take on that task." And I challenge back to say, yes, you can. You have the critical thinking skill set to be able to approach any problem, and you have the ability to do research, and you have the ability to ask questions and seek information and try to learn more to help you with solving the problem in front of you. It's not about whether you've gone through an exact experience and you're able to apply a certain skill to that exact experience. It's about being adaptable and flexible, because you're going to have so many things thrown at you any given day, and depending on the type of organization you're in, big or small, you're wearing multiple hats and you're dealing with multiple issues, and there's something really dynamic and exciting about being a part of a not-for-profit world and what you're able to accomplish. And so just being able to take on any challenge that comes your way is really key to your survival, to your growth, and to your development in any organization, but in not-for-profit especially.
Sorry, I was listening, waiting to listen. I hope you're taking from today's panel that it doesn't really matter what kinds of interests and skills you have. There's a place in the nonprofit sector for you. So we've heard about accounting, we've heard about communications and brand, we've heard about programmatic, we've heard about risk management, legal, facility. We haven't talked about facility, but facility design and maintenance and all of those things that create wonderful experiences for people. So whatever interests and skills you have, there is a place in the nonprofit sector for you. So I would kind of build on that answer in terms of what would be the kind of competencies that probably will help you thrive in the sector. One would be, probably heard about it already, is relational. If you like to work alone, the nonprofit sector is probably not going to be the place that you will thrive. If you like to work with other people, you enjoy learning from others, you get energy from working with others, then the sector will be wonderful for you. And there has never been a time in my career where there has been more requirements for teamwork and for a diversity of people coming together to try to do things, a mandate, solve a problem. So that working together with other people, if you love it, then this is the place for you to be. Two other sort of things is sort of that tolerance for ambiguity. You know, you're wearing 5 or 6 different hats, and so it's not necessarily going to be a clear line, a clear direction to everything. So that tolerance for ambiguity and kind of embracing and enjoying that energy and that lack of clarity is another kind of quality that seems to work really, really well for the nonprofit sector. And then it allows you to do all kinds of different things as a result of not wearing just one hat and going in one direction. So, and then the last thing I would just say is that alignment to the values, that what you believe in and what is really important to you, having that lined up with that organization, because not all nonprofits are the same, that finding that place where you really feel like, I feel it here, this is the place for me to be, is sort of that third kind of quality I'd encourage you to look at as you're looking at different organizations in the sector.
When it comes to skills, there are things that you can learn. You can learn data processing. You can learn the process of doing something. So never think because you've chosen one path that that's where you are. And you can build a specialty there, but you can always learn the skills that you need to do. So there's stuff that you can learn, and then there's stuff that you can build. And the things that I think that are so important to build in the not-for-profit sector are people skills and being able to effectively communicate and collaborate with other people. So playing well in the sandbox sometimes is one of the most important skills to learn. There can be, and there are silos in the sector like there are everywhere else, but the most effective organizations that I've seen are the ones that cross borders and cross barriers and break down the silos and really do collaborate and communicate, and amazing things come out of that. But it's not an organization that does that. It's the people inside of it that make it happen. So if you were to think, where's one area, if that's not an area that you're comfortable with, find opportunities to practice it and become comfortable with it, or at least become, make sure it's someplace that you want to be.
I think they've all been captured, but from my perspective, the 3 traits that are most important are collaboration, creativity, and flexibility. On the collaboration point, the people part, your team might be very small in a nonprofit. It could be 3 people. It's perhaps even more important that you have strong people skills in those environments, because you're really going to need to lean on each other more than when there are 25, 30, 40, 100 people. Creativity, absolutely. You're going to need to think of new and innovative ways of doing things. I think it takes a lot of creativity to get 300,000 reports in the hands of people across 3 provinces than it does a 10 times more expensive shareholder document in the hands of a couple thousand shareholders at an AGM. And flexibility, you're going to have to roll with the punches an awful lot, good and bad. But I think that's absolutely critical to be able to be, and open-mindedness in that flexibility, open-minded to the perspectives of others on your team. I also think passion is extremely important, probably in any role, but definitely in the nonprofit sector. My passions, I figured them out as I went along. My passion was not the corporate entertainment environment, and I think that's what ate away at me and why I was yearning so desperately to get back to a nonprofit environment. because I was working crazy days, learning a lot, but getting up at 8 in the morning, at work till 9, 10 at night, and then offered a hotel room across the street so I could just go sleep and then be back here for 5. And you know what? I don't mind doing that for the IWK or for the Mount. I did at the end of the day think, really? So Mike Holmes can? Oh my gosh. Anyway, I personally just needed to be connected passionately to something, and I think if you've got a passion, then you'll connect with the nonprofit environment quite well.
Perfect. So now is the time for student questions. So just raise your hand if you have a question, but also introduce yourself. So say your name, and then you can ask your question to like one of the panelists or all of them. And don't be shy.
Okay, I'll come over here.
Sorry.
No, you go right ahead. I get to pick. Sure.
Good afternoon. My name's Alnisha. This is for, I guess, any of you. Based on what I've heard towards the end of the conversation is that it seems a strong emphasis in people who build energy and interacting with people, which is more akin to an extrovert. So is there a place for introverted personality types in this kind of field? And I just want to clarify that introvert doesn't mean you're antisociable or unsociable. But definitely, I'm not one to like gain energy from interacting with a whole heap of people, but would still be interested in that field.
Thank you.
I was just going to say that as well. I'm a proud introvert. So I obviously everyone is on a spectrum one way or another, and I would probably sleep quite well after this, because this is a lot of energy to be in front of you on this side of the table, all these eyes staring at you. So there is definitely a role for both. I would say that someone who has introversion qualities and don't excel with building energy off of crowds and that type of environment still has a place in not-for-profit. I would say a larger institution is probably more where you would seek your direction. There's a lot of roles within the organization that support from a research and a data management analytics. We have entire teams that are building programs in the back end from a marketing and communications perspective that don't have that same relationship management requirement in terms of a public face. But when it comes to being introverted, relationships are still very vital. And so one of the things to remember as an introvert is, even though this isn't an external relationship, it's an internal relationship that you're trying to manage, you're still trying to find the best in the other person and trusting that they're also trying to find the best in you. Sometimes the trust is where there's breakdowns in any type of relationship building. If you don't trust that I'm actually here and want you to be successful, and that I have a skill set to offer you and vice versa, that's where we generally find a lot of the toxicity in cultures. But definitely look at organizations and the type of roles that they have, because they're not all external facing, but large organizations are probably going to be more likely to have those type of roles.
It bothers me to no end that often we connect leadership with extraversion. And, well, you can't be a good leader unless you're an extrovert. And I've seen excellent potential leaders passed over just because their nature is an introverted nature. I think call it what it is, and as uncomfortable as that may be, call people out on that, because I think ultimately the best leaders could be extroverted or introverted, but many of the best leaders I know are introverted. So I think introverts unite. We can.
I'm an extrovert, and I need my introverts, because sometimes it's the balancing factor. Some of the most effective people that I know in the not-for-profit sector, maybe they skate on the edge of their comfort zone, but they really do. They offset a team well, whether it's a background or whether it's front facing. They bring an incredibly important skill.
Yeah, I would just add, every organization has their own culture about what's the culture of the organization, and so asking, how do you build your teams? What are you looking for? So that organizations that embrace diversity and are looking for having as much diversity, and in this case, introvert, extrovert as one example, that they've realized they're going to get the best results from their team by embracing and supporting that wide variety of different perspective, skills, background, personality styles, learning styles. Those are the organizations where there's a place for everyone. And not all the nonprofit organizations are like that. So asking that question is usually a great way to say, is this a place that I can belong regardless of what my learning style is or my leadership style is? Great question.
All right, Bucky.
Good afternoon. My name is Buki. So my question is, I heard like 3 out of 4 people, or maybe the 4 of you, saying that you entered your organization through volunteering. So I want to ask, so do you want to advise us as potential people that want to work in the nonprofit to enter the organization by volunteering, or can we just apply and be given the opportunity to?
Volunteering, whether you volunteer with that organization or not, the cool thing with volunteering is that it allows you to build your skills that you might not be getting in your day-to-day, whether it's in a job or whether it's in your education. So really learning how to market those skills is huge for me when I'm looking at resumes. If someone says, oh, I had this volunteer role, I'll often dive into it and say, well, what did you learn from that, and kind of what did you bring? Because it also helps you to determine like what area you want to go in. Is it administration? Is it communications? Is it fundraising? Is it that very important background accounting piece, whatever it is? So I recommend volunteering regardless at any point in your life, and even when you're in that role. One of the most important things for me working with a charitable organization is maintaining my ability to volunteer for the things that I personally have passion for as well. So because you're still always learning.
Yeah, that's a yes and again, as we've talked about, that volunteering is a wonderful way for you to get to learn what different organizations are like, what the culture is like. Does it feel like home? Does it feel like family? Is this a place that I want to spend my time? Because if you're applying for a job, you may find yourself in an organization and go, oh my gosh, this isn't the organization for me, and now what will I do? And volunteering can be as straightforward as maybe helping out for a one-day event, you know, the Blue Nose Marathon. You can help out at a water station, so there's a one-day commitment. So there's ways you can volunteer in a way that hopefully helps you manage it with everything else that you're trying to do, or you could get on some kind of an advisory committee for an organization, and then there's so many different ways to get involved, you know, to that major commitment of becoming on a board of directors. So there are lots of ways to volunteer, and I would concur that when you are looking at applications to see someone has experience in the sector, it's one of those tick boxes, absolutely.
So my question is for Lisa. So what I learned for Social Enterprise for a day last year is that a huge part to your mission is relaying or creating awareness, essentially. And in today's time, we have very unique platforms to do so. One person that utilizes these platforms is Jeremy Saunders with his podcast, Sick Boy, and he also did a TED Talk in Toronto. So my question is, which platforms do you use within your organization? And also, does your organization create strategic relationships with people like Jeremy Saunders?
Absolutely. In fact, Jeremy's one of our favorite. He's a very sought after speaker. We're so proud to have him on our team. Him and the guys from Sick Boy. They changed the face of how people don't just talk about cystic fibrosis, but chronic disease or disease in general. And in fact, they allowed people that voice. So we look for opportunities to partner with people that have that skill, and also people that are a little more quiet. In terms of what platforms we've used, our organization has undergone a complete transformation in the last, I'd say, at least in the last 5 years, to be an organization that's accessible no matter where you are. So still traditional forms of communication, so print, even from a fundraising perspective, but moving into digital and looking at digital fundraising communications, and really building our presence. In fact, we're really excited that we've won a few awards based on some campaigns that we've run. If you look up 31 Reasons to Give, we had a really cool campaign last year that engaged with people in our community of all ages and all stages, and from all geographies as well. So it's an interesting place to be able to not have this, we're spread across the entire country, coast to coast to coast, and we have such unique stories. So really looking for those interesting and innovative ways to get our message out.
I was just going to add one thing. One of the what's really interesting about cystic fibrosis, I actually have a daughter who has cystic fibrosis, so I know Lisa very well, but is the age has increased. And so it used to be a youth-based illness, and now there's a lot of people who are in their 20s and 30s and 40s. So there's a lot more events that are happening. So cystic fibrosis has really had to change their whole strategy from being more similar to the IWK in Mandate Always About Youth, but to actually living with it and having a quality of life. So I think they've done an amazing job, but it is a very challenging platform to work through. Yep. Other questions? All right. Oh, wait. Okay. Do.
Yeah, please, I'd like to know if, as a big organization, a smaller organization, if you have a sustainability plan, and if you do, can you share that with us? Yeah, like, if the maybe you don't have funding anymore. Does that mean? Does that mean that's the end of the organization? So,
Well, let me attempt this a little bit. So we have a few different funding models that help us to remain sustainable. So within our organization, we do have endowments that we set up. So these are investments that produce income so that the capital is invested and we are continuing to realize an income on an annual basis. And the more capital you put into these investments, and as long as the markets are doing well, the more income that you can expect from those type of programs. But sustainability requires constantly innovating and talking about how you have to change your pathway to get your message out to communities over time with different channels. A podcast like Sick Boy has struck a chord with a specific audience that is very difficult to grab attention of. And they've done it by, cursing and just having fun and drinking and talking about all these illnesses, and really kind of brought something to life for people, a different audience. So innovating is also looking at where our audiences are spending their time and how do we continue to get that message across, because in a digital world it's very difficult to achieve the same things that we used to be able to do through mail, as an example. So sustainability plans always need to be focused on strategic goals, the economic environment that you're in, and how you're going to continue to evolve your programs moving forward, and succession planning also being something that needs to be a part of that. We have a CEO who within the next probably 5 years will likely be retiring. So that's going to be an incredible leadership change for our organization and all of the teams that are within it. And so our board of directors will be involved in putting a succession plan in place and seeking a new leader for the organization. And so being inside the organization during a time like that, there's all kinds of unknowns and questions. And so being able to rely on certain theories like change management is really great. John Fisher is someone else who I rely on when I'm thinking about change management, personal change pathway and all of the different emotions that individuals feel along that path. So all of that plays a role in a sustainability plan. So I would say that we have it, but I don't think I could hash it out in a 2-minute response.
I think sustainability is a plan, and it's also a mindset, 24/7, every day of the year, from the moment of inception for an organization till wherever it goes. And I think that's a mindset in terms of regular, prudent fiscal management for an institution. At the Mount, we have endowments through advancement as well. So there's that component of sustainability. But I think there's a continual mindset, and this isn't directly my area of expertise, but within our financial arm, a focus on sustainability at all times and in all things.
Hi, I'm Hillary. So this is also based on something we learned in Heidi's class. Betty, you were talking earlier about how it's really important to celebrate diversity and people from different backgrounds, speaking to the question about introverts. So on the topic of people from different backgrounds or in diversity in these organizations, can any of you speak to Indigenous considerations in the organizations that you've worked with? Can you speak to Indigenous considerations in the organizations that any of you have worked with?
I can speak to the amount, and maybe I'm telling you things you already know, so perhaps you want to hear from these folks more than you want to hear from me, but it's a significant focus for Mount St. Vincent University. We have internal, external advisory committees. We have a special advisor to the President on Aboriginal Affairs. We've got work underway on several of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission reports, the items in there, for example, in communication studies and elsewhere. So it's, I think it's a major area of emphasis. We're just about to head into a new strategic planning cycle for the institution. And while it was present in the previous plan, I think you'll see it given even more emphasis in the next plan, but it's a huge area of focus for the Mount.
Just from a hiring practice perspective, diversity is something that, as an organization, we focus greatly on. But I think that there are times when we feel challenged in being able to create as much diversity within our organization as we desire based on the applicants that are coming forward. So I would actually have a question back to say, how can we actually connect better to more diverse groups, either in how we are promoting our jobs that are available, our positions that are available, or in creating greater connections within different communities and opening up doors to informational interviews and connecting with individuals that are trying to seek new opportunities within the field. But there are certain skill sets that we do look for and certain education that we look for, but at the end of the day, you know, diversity is very important, and we are constantly seeking ways that we can improve the diversity that we're seeing within the industry. Within fundraising, there's a skew female. And we'd like to change even that from a diversity perspective, and cultures as well is something that we would like to see a bigger change in the applicants that are coming forward. So it's definitely a two-way dialogue, and we always encourage the community to come out and offer us some advice as well.
From our perspective, diversity is something that's incredibly important to us, both from an organizational perspective, but also in terms of reaching our population and reaching the people that are impacted by our disease. And you're absolutely right. It's finding effective ways to communicate with anybody, whether it's race or age or gender or geographical diversity. So it is something that we're always focused on and looking at.
Back here? Did you want to ask your question? No one else has a question. I think anybody in the back? I think you are.
It might not be appropriate when
you ask away. They'll tell you it's not.
This question's for Jillian, and if it is an inappropriate venue, please let me know. So you're the Director of Communications for Mount St. Vincent, and I'm curious if you are involved in the conciliation process between MSVU and MSVU FA?
Well, not directly.
Not directly? I was just going to ask, like, from a risk management perspective, if MSVU is prepared to pursue alternate dispute resolution methods aside from a strike to reduce the risk for, the students and the stakeholders at MSVU.
Absolutely. And I'm not directly involved. The negotiating. I'm not on the negotiating team, so maybe I'm well positioned then to say something. But absolutely, I can tell you that the university is committed to doing everything it can to reach a settlement with the Faculty Association and to continue talks, which fortunately are going to continue next week and the next week. And I think both parties are keen to do everything they can to avoid that kind of an impact on the student population primarily. So I hope that helps. I know it doesn't provide a lot, but yeah, it's as a communicator in an organization that has a labor relations component. I am, though, quite involved. That's another area of work for someone who may work in a nonprofit sector.
All questions are open. Anybody else? So Abby, can I take more?
Yeah.
So just to close, I'm just going to make one quick comment. So my name's Heidi Weigen. So I'm sort of heading up the nonprofit leadership program that just started this year. So if you've taken an interest in anything that these wonderful ladies, who I sort of know all of them personally, but if you have any interest in that particular area, make sure you come see me. There's lots of students in the room who are already in the degree program. There's a certificate program, and there's a minor. It works in arts and science. It works in any of the professional studies, communications, PR, etc. So if you do have an interest, make sure you just touch base with me or contact whoever it is in your department, and we'll be able to help you out. But it is a fantastic area. A lot of us have journeyed through for-profits, over back into nonprofit, and it's funny, the word that I always kind of attribute to it is you find your meaning there. So make sure whatever it is you do, you are passionate about it. So I'll turn it back over to Abby.
Thanks. And yes, I totally am with Heidi. Check it out. Good program. So that concludes our panel for today. So let's give our panelists a big round of applause. We thank you guys so much for being here today and sharing with our students. I know it's super valuable for our students, especially since the Nonprofit Leadership Program did start this fall. So it is great to have a panel of nonprofit sector industry people here after the program started, so thank you. The stamping for the Learning Passport will occur in the back of the room. I'll hand out the surveys, and that is it for this afternoon, so thank you very much.